It's June 6th, 2022, and exactly 16 years ago, almost to the hour, I lost my first child. It was 666, June 6th, 2006. I was engaged to who I thought at the time, and the love of my life, my soulmate, Ardita. And I love this woman, man, more than anything in the world. I loved her tremendously. And we met in unusual circumstances. We dated, we moved in together, we lived together for 3 years or so. I was very immature. She wanted to get serious, and I wasn't ready at that time in my life, and I was a little cuckoo, and she finally, eventually, we split, and we were split for a year or two, and then we wound up crossing paths kind of randomly almost in Chicago. And when we crossed paths, we instantly hit it back off. We realized how both of us had, we owned our mistakes from the past, and we grew up, and we just talked, and we connected, and we wound up getting back together. We spent a lot of time together. She was still living in Chicago. I was living in Detroit, so we took turns going back and forth every weekend to see each other. And she wound up getting pregnant, and we got engaged. She moved in back to Michigan to be with me, and I bought a house. This is my first house. 2003 or so I bought that house, but I bought this house for her and I, and then we got pregnant. Sorry. And I was so looking forward to having this child, and I think she was too initially. We really, really wanted to have a family. We loved each other, tremendously. But at that time of my life, I was so cuckoo, man. I was out of my mind. I was still drinking every day. When I'd get drunk, I'd go out and I would steal. I was doing all kinds of shit. I was driving like a maniac, not just fast, but like a maniac. I don't know how God kept me alive, or the people alive around me at that time. And, Ardita was Muslim, and she was worried that her family would disown her if she was with me, and she wanted to make sure that I had a real commitment in order to make this happen with her. But the way I was living my life, I was saying, yeah, I'm committed, yeah, I'm committed, yeah, I'm committed. I was talking the talk, but I wasn't walking the walk. And I think in her heart of hearts, she really believed in her heart and soul that she was going to wind up being a single mom trying to do it all on her own if she went ahead and had this baby with me. And I convinced her. I thought I was convincing her. No, I'm going to be here. I'll do whatever it takes. If I've got to work 3 jobs, I'll do it. And I really meant that. I meant well. I really did. And I always wanted to be a father. I wanted to be a dad. I wanted to have my own family, and I wanted it to be with her because she was my dream girl, man, my soulmate, my love of my life. And so much passion. And she eventually said, I don't think now's the time, and she wanted to abort our child. And I thought, she's crazy. Why would you want to kill our kid? We wanted this. We got engaged. We want to spend the rest of our lives together. Why would you want to do such a thing? And I tried like hell. More than the hardest, the strongest, most persistent sales pitch I've ever given in my entire life was to her, trying to convince her into keeping our child. And I thought I had her convinced, but a couple days before June 6th, she said she's set the appointment and she's going to go ahead with the abortion. And I told her, ultimately, it's your body. I'll support any decision you make, and I'll be here for you. I love you. But please reconsider. I promise you that when that kid turns 1 year old, you'll look at me and thank me. On that kid's first birthday party, you'll thank me for talking you out of this. I promise you would, and I'm sure I would. And we didn't go through. She decided she was going to abort their child anyway. And so that was a really, really tough for me to swallow that decision that she made. And I remember walking to the abortion clinic on York Street right outside of Chicago. And there was protesters standing in front of us on the sidewalk, on the blacktop going into the parking lot. And this old lady, I felt so ashamed, and I was so upset I was staring at the ground. I didn't want to look up at all, and I sure as hell didn't want to make eye contact with anybody. But I remember this lady standing right in front of me. She's probably in her 60s, and she had this seatbelt type of strap over her shoulders, carrying a sign. And on this big sign, it was probably a good 4-foot sign, it had a picture of a dead baby, and it said, "Please don't murder your child." And I had no other choice to get around this woman but to take my eyes off of the cement in front of me, to look up for this long. And I made eye contact with her for half a second, and the look of terror in her eyes, the pain that she had in her eyes, it was almost like she felt my pain. So I'll never forget that lady's face. And this is 16 years exactly today, right now, 16 years later. I could pick that lady out of a lineup of 100,000 people just like that. Anyway, Ardita went ahead through the procedure. I was there in the lobby when it happened, in the waiting room of the clinic, and got her back in the car afterwards, took her to a hotel, and we laid down, and I was there trying to comfort her. But in my mind, I was so caught between pain and hurt, anger and resentment, fear of God. You know, we just killed our child. I didn't want that, but I didn't stop it. And I couldn't look at her the same after a couple days later. Every time I'd look at her, I was so angry. And it was just a really, 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 really tough time of my life. And I kind of self-sabotaged the rest of that relationship. I became very verbally abusive. Physically, I threw stuff at her. I mean, I was bad. And I was out of control. I was drinking. My alcoholism was way out of control at that point. And during that process, there were nights that I wouldn't even come home. And I stayed at my friend Paul's house one night because Ardita and I were in a big fight, and didn't want it to escalate anymore. So I spent the night at his house, and he drove me back home at 7 o'clock in the morning. And when he did, all of her stuff was packed up and she was gone. And it was probably the right thing that happened, even though I tried to intercept her. I went to Chicago and to her mom's house and tried to get her to come back, and it needed to happen. That separation needed to take place. I needed some real time to crash and burn as hard as I could, and to finally get the pieces kind of back in order in my life over the next few years. But every single year on June 6th, I would call her or text her. Sometimes I would cry. Sometimes I would say some kind of mean things. And she finally told me that the reason why she did it was just because she knew that she would wind up being a single mom, having to do it all on her own if she would have stayed with me. It's not that she wanted to not be a mom or she didn't want to have my child or be with me. It was just, there was no way she could feel confident in knowing that she would be able to do it. You know, she was going to be a single mom with no help from her family, and I'd either be in prison or in jail or dead. So I felt really guilty about that for a lot of years. I felt like I wasn't man enough. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like, I just, I had a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of self-resentment, I guess you would call it. And it wasn't until in a few years later, I think when I was doing my 4th and 5th step in AA, where it's really diving in deep to try to take a full inventory of myself and then turning it over and sharing it with another human being, did I ever find acceptance with what took place on June 6, 2006. I have a child now, he's 9, and I'm not with his mom, but I provide for her and I provide for him, and he's with me 50-50. I'm with him every week and he's with her every other week, and we have a pretty good relationship as far as how we co-parent. But I support the hell out of them, and I can honestly say that I'm probably one of the best parents I've ever seen in my entire life. And that's one thing that I'm very good at, is being a dad. But for years, I regretted so badly that I wasn't able to show up for Ardita the way I'm showing up for my son today, and that I wasn't a man enough to make her feel confident in going through with having this child with me. But I was crazy. I was off my rocker back then. So how could anybody feel comfortable with that? And I beat myself up for years, and it wasn't until a few years ago when I looked at my son, and I think he was probably 3 or 4 at the time. And I looked in his eyes, and I love that kid more than I love life itself times a billion, over and over and over again, infinity. And I looked at him and I said, you know what, if that wouldn't have happened, if that abortion never would have taken place with Ardita, then I never would have got to meet Giovanni. I never would have this beautiful son that I have today, this perfect-hearted kid with such a good soul. You know, he would never have been born. I never would have met his mom. And so that was the first time that I was actually able to really find acceptance, I think, during that process. And find appreciation for the chain of events that took place that I, for many years, just regretted and hated myself over. I find peace in that today. And part of that's through the recovery program that I'm in that's really kind of taught me a lot of things. And some of it's from my own exploration, you know, but I can say that 16 years later, after the fact, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about that unborn child. That I'm not sad, that I don't pray for him or her. I don't know what the sex was. And I wish I could have met him. I wish I could have been a father for him. But at the same time, I'm actually very grateful for the way things panned out, because it gave me the space that I needed to grow up so I could eventually show up. You know, I needed to grow up and go through that pain and that shame and that self-loathing and everything else, that pity that I had for myself. I needed to go through that for a lot of years and really experience that pain in order to grow. And they say that every breakthrough happens as a result of a breakdown, and this is a perfect example of that. So today I'm grateful for that chain of events that took place, because I never would have had my son, and she wouldn't have had her son. Ardita has a beautiful boy named Ari, and he's just a year or two older than Giovanni, and he's a wonderful kid too. I watched for many years from a distance his little league and the things on her social media that I would keep track of, and just, you know, and I ran into her a couple of years ago and really kind of got to talk to her, and that was neat. But you know, she wouldn't have had her wonderful son, and I wouldn't have my wonderful son if those events wouldn't have taken place. So unfortunately, as painful as certain events might be, the more painful, the more we have the ability to grow. And today I'm grateful for that. I used to want to erase bad moments and erase painful moments, but the pain is what gives us growth. And anyway, I'm rambling now at this point. God bless that child. God bless all the children that weren't able to be born and have a life of their own, regardless of the circumstance. I'm just going to take the next minute to be in silence and just kind of reflect, and also give thanks to God. Thank you, God. I'm grateful today. And I try to be conscious and be grateful as much as I can. Accepting the things I cannot change. Thank you.